Hello everyone. In this video, we will be going over Python functions. So Python functions allow you to reuse a code over and over again. Now, this is not like a loop, but it's more of just executing the same lines of code as many times as you may need to without necessarily attaching it to a repetitive loop. So in this case, functions just allow you to put whatever statements you want inside of the function and use it as needed. But this will make more sense as the examples occur. So first, you need to know that a function is actually defined by the keyword def and then followed by a function name and then parentheses. So if we look at that, I will give us the syntax. So our syntax would be um, function syntax, and we are going to do, it is going to be def function name parentheses and then function body. So the function body is the code that's going to execute each time. So what you need to know is here in the example, we'll create our first function. So def will say hello everyone. And in this function, we are going to tell the function to print out different statements. So hello everyone. And then the next statement we could say is print, print, how are you? And that will print out two statements whenever the user calls it. So in the first case, when you call this function, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to print hello everyone, and then the second thing it's going to do is print how are you. So if you were to do something like this and press run, nothing is going to happen. The reason nothing is going to happen is when you use functions, you have to call the function after you create it. So we created the function here, but we never called it. So you need to call a function. And to call the function, you would call it by its function name. So this will be hello everyone, and follow it by the empty parentheses. So now when you run this, you see it says hello everyone, how are you? So this is a simple example of creating a function and creating and calling the function. So first we created it and then we called it. And then that is how you would see it. So let's get into another example. You can also have a function with arguments. So your function with arguments is going to take in information. So arguments is going to hold data or some values and it's going to use it inside of the function. So if that's the case, you need to enter in a value that will be a placeholder for that argument in the function, which you'll see in this example. So if we were to have def and we'll say hello you, and then we'll say name. So in here, we're going to say print hello you and print it is nice to meet you, and then we'll give it the name. So after we do that, we will call the function and it will be hello you, but in this case, you would need to enter in the user's name, so we can put in Alex. So if you look in this function, name is going to be a temporary placeholder for whatever data is inputted when the function is called. And in this case, our data or our parameter or our argument is called or is Alex. So Alex would replace the name in the function. So anywhere you see name inside of the function or in the function name is going to be replaced with Alex. So if you click run, then it says hello you, and it is nice to meet you, Alex. So when I said code is reusable, we can call our function again, and we could say hello you, and then give it a name, Ashley. And then we say hello you again, and we'll give it the name TJ. And then when you click run, you will see the output for all names. So instead of us constantly writing the 2 lines of code, hello you, it is nice to meet you, we just simply keep calling the function name to say hello to the different users that are inputted when the function is called. So if you see here, we basically entered in the name Alex, Ashley, and TJ, and then we called the function with those names, and then you see that name gets replaced with whatever data is passed into the function call. So that will be an example of functions with arguments. So there's a lot of things you can do with functions. And like I said, it's very useful when you're creating or using the same lines of code over and over again, but not necessarily in a loop. So let's get into another example. So let's add a block of code and let's do some more functions. So we'll say def add numbers. So by this name, you can tell we're going to add numbers. So we'll say num1, num2, num3. Then we're going to put in our print, or in our function, we would say sum is going to equal num1, num2, num3. So then we could say print the sum is, then we'll give it the sum. So there we have it. We created our function, and now we're going to call our function. So we'll say add numbers, and then we'll give it 3 numbers. So 20, 10, and 5. Oh, that was 220, but we'll keep that. And then when we click run, you see that it printed out the sum is 220, 10, and 5. So in this example, it's simply showing you exactly how the numbers are passed in. So if you see here, num1 is equal to 220, num2 is equal to 10, and num3 is equal to 5. So this is just an example to show you how the number being passed in is storing the numbers that you enter here. So now that we have this, we will change this to some num, and then we'll equal that to hold the numbers added together. So num1 plus num2 plus num3, and we'll change this so we'll say the numbers being added sum, and then we'll say sum num here. And then when we click run, you see it shows us the numbers being added are 220, 10, and 5, and then it says the sum is 235. So this is just showing you how to use different arguments inside of your function and how you could complete different statements or operations inside of the function to do different things. So in this case, let's say we want to reuse this function. So we could say add numbers, and then we're going to give it some more numbers, 10, 30, and 10. And we'll do it again, add numbers. This time we'll do single digits, and we'll say 2, 3, and 4. And then we click run. And then you see it constantly completes the actions for each number that's entered as arguments. So our sum is changing each time the function executes. So this is an example of how you could create a function with parameters and reuse the function by calling it just by entering different values or different arguments. So let's get into another example. So let's say we want to make a bigger code. So let's say we'll say name equals input, enter a name. We'll say age equals input. And in this case, I don't care if it's a string or int, so I'll just leave it like this. Enter a age. And then we can say sport equals input. Enter your favorite sport. So now we just have some variables that we're going to use in our function. And now we'll create our function. So def about you. We'll say we're going to input n, we're going to input a, and we're going to input s. And this is all basically just the first initial of the variables from above. And in this case, we're going to say print hello. And then we'll say n. We're going to say print wow, you are, then we'll say a, then we'll say years old. And then we also have the sports. So print so your favorite sport is, then we could say S. And then how cool. So that would just simply be printing different statements, and it will be using the arguments that we enter when we call the function. But as long as you have the placeholders of the arguments, you can also ask the user to enter information inside the function without just being outside of the function. So in this case, we could say favorite sport, and we could say equals input. What? So actually, we'll do it like this. We'll do favorite team equals input. What is your favorite team? And then we can say print I like the favorite team too. So now that will be a little interactive function, and we're asking for user input outside of the function and inside of the function. So here we could say, for this example, if you had to reuse the variable outside of the function, then you can. So in this case, if we were just to simply say print name, print age, and print sport, then you will see it's going to ask the name. We'll put TJ, we'll put in 12, and then we'll put in golf. And then it will allow us to enter it in, and it will print out those variables to us. Now, if you see here, we did not call the function, which is why we didn't see any of this. But this is just showing you, although we are asking for this information outside of the function, we can use it inside of the function or outside of the function by itself. So now we will use it inside of the function. So I'll just put some lines so we can see a break in the code. And then we could say about you. We're going to enter in name, age, and the sport. And then we'll click run. So it's going to ask to enter a name. So in this case, remember the first thing that we're doing is entering the print statements for 12, 13, and 14. So I'm just going to enter the name, and it's going to ask us again when the function runs. So golf. So here it is. Hello TJ, wow, you're 12 years old. So your favorite sport is golf. How cool. What is your favorite team? Now obviously this one doesn't have a team. So I could say we'll just put Miami, and it says I like Miami too. Now, in this case, this function would work better if we had like a certain sport. So here we could say basketball, and then it says I like the basketball too. So in this case, you need to remember what you're doing. And you have to remember how you're calling your information. So in here, I said your favorite sport is 15. Obviously, that's not correct. So you don't know what your user can enter, and you just have to be cautious of that, that even though you're wanting your code to do a specific thing, you don't know what your user is going to enter, and you just have to be considerate of that. But in this case, we could expand this a little further. So if you know golf doesn't have a team, so in this case, we could say, like, put an if statement to say if S is equal to golf or S is equal to golf in all caps. Then we could say print I like golf too. And then you can place this other statements here in the else statement. So we'll just slide those over. In this case, it will handle it if the user says golf. It won't ask what their favorite team is. So we'll run this. And actually for this, I'm going to comment these out because I've already showed you how those work. So we'll do that, and we'll click run again, and we'll say enter a name. We'll say TJ. We'll say 12, and we'll say the favorite sport is golf. And then it says, so your favorite sport is golf. How cool. I love golf too. So you see here, it is running our if statement in our function. Now, if we run this again, we can say TJ, he's going to be 12. We can say basketball. And then it asks what's his favorite team, and then we can say the Lakers. And now you see it says, I like the Lakers too. So in this case, our function had two different options, or depending on what the user inputted, it had two different options. And this is how you can start to combine the topics you've already learned together to do different things. So in this function, we're using an if-else statement. You could also implement a loop in the function and different things. So we'll show an example with the loop. So here, we'll open up a new line of code, and we'll say def count numbers. Then we'll give it a number. Then we can say print, we are going to count numbers. Then we could say while number is less than 25, we're going to print number. Now, in this case, you probably wouldn't want to do that. You would probably want to put number as the number you're going to stop at, but we'll just go with this for now. And if you remember, when you use a while loop, you have to make it false in some way. So you have to be considerate of that. So I'm just going to run it, and we'll run into the errors and then we'll fix them. So we'll do count numbers, and then I will put in a number and I will say 13. And then when we click run, you see that our loop is going to run forever. Pretty much an infinite loop because we're not stopping it in any way, shape, or form. So in this case, you don't want to do something like this. In this case, you would probably want whatever argument is being passed to be the last number of the condition. So I'll put number here, and then we could say while I is less than n, and we'll start I as 0. And then here we'll change this to be I, and then we'll say I plus equals 1. So now when we run this, you see we are going to count numbers, and it does 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that is going to print the numbers based on what you gave it. And in this case, we're using a while loop inside of a function. So that's also something you could do. And each time you wanted to do that, we could say count numbers, say 21, run. We're going to count numbers 0 to 12, and then we're going to count numbers 0 through 20. So that is another way you can use your functions. So then we've covered, if we go back to the top, we've covered just simple functions with no arguments and how to call them. We've did a function with arguments. We've did a function with multiple arguments and multiple function calls. We've also done a function with if-else statements, and we've done a function with while loops. Now we will do a function with the return statement. So we'll do using return statement. So a return statement will allow you to return a value to the user based on the operation that is being done. So we'll do def add numbers equals, oh, not equals. We'll put num1 and num2. So here we will say print, or actually we'll put sum is going to equal num1 plus num2. And then we could say we want to return sum. So then if you were to call it add numbers, then we'll say 12, 10, then that will pretty much add 12 plus 10. And if you click run, you see nothing happens. So when you return the value of sum, it doesn't mean that it's going to return it to the user unless you tell it to display it or print it out or store it as another variable. So there's two ways you could do this. So the first way is to pretty much, and I'll save this function call. So we'll do this. We'll say it does not display the sum. So the first way to display sum is if we say sum is going to equal to add numbers 12 and 10. And then the second way we could do it is if you just print it out. So that would be print add numbers 12 and 10. All right, and we'll run this. So you see it says 32 from here. So this way does not work. And I did this way to pretty much show you that you may think that this is going to work if you simply add it here. And it may not. So here you see 12 plus 20 And in this case, it equals 32, so it did work. And in this case, it does not print anything because we did not tell it to print it, but it is storing in the sum. So if you were to say print sum, then you will see both of the numbers. So that is how you do that. And there's multiple ways you can print out your return values or the return statements of different functions, and these are two of them. So just keep these in mind. You can choose the first way or the second way. It doesn't matter. You'll get the result to you either way. So that is just an example of using the return statement with your functions. So hopefully this tutorial was helpful. It showed you how you can reuse your code in means of a function and which you can store in a function. And this will be very beneficial to you when you start to make more complex codes, and it'll allow you to keep reusing different lines of codes whenever you need it throughout different locations in your code. So hopefully this made a lot of sense, and we will continue on with more learning in Python in the next video. But until then, I hope that you test all of these out yourself to see how they work and try to practice on your own so you can get better at coding. And we will see you in the next video.